Greater transparency would solve a lot of problems in our country. From the media to healthcare to secondary education, technology, and most of corporate America, the lack of transparency in how things work, what they cost, and their underlying motives contribute perhaps more than anything else to the skyrocketing rates of institutional distrust we see all over our data. Unfortunately, the leaders of those institutions often benefit when things are at their most opaque. They'll rationalize it by saying the details are too hard for us to understand or too costly to produce. The complexities, whether real or manufactured, spawn entire secondary markets of brokers, consultants, and other middlemen who dig further into our wallets, while creating another layer of people motivated to keep things anything but simple. At Civic Science, we're trying and succeeding at solving this problem in the advertising industry. It turns out that by merely asking people questions about what they want, we can deliver highly effective ads back to them without creeping on all their personal data. We usurp most of the labyrinth of ad tech, making the whole experience more cost-effective for our customers. Mark Cuban is doing the same thing in healthcare. Mark last joined me on the podcast nearly 4.5 years ago, when we were still squarely in lockdown. Since that time, he stepped away from Shark Tank and the Dallas Mavericks, all while taking a new shot from what seemed like the logo at mid-court. Cost-plus drugs aim to disrupt the prescription drug market by offering consumers a lower-cost and transparent alternative. It's working. Mark and I talked about his inspiration and audacious goals for the business, how he's succeeding without spending a penny on marketing, and how he would fix our broken healthcare system if he had a magic wand. We also talked about how sports has changed since he walked away from the Mavs, what we're learning from our Gen Z kids, and why eggs are always better when dipped in ketchup. So I hope you'll enjoy the latest quadrennial conversation with Mark Cuban and me, the dumbest guy in the room. Mark Cuban, my friend, it is great to see you. Coming to us from Dallas, I assume?
Yes, sir.
Well, greetings from your childhood hometown of Pittsburgh. Let's jump in. I got a serious question to jump in with. Everything going on in the world is so crazy. It's unprecedented. What surprises you the most right now, and why is it Indiana Hoosiers football?
Because Coach Cignetti is a Pittsburgh boy.
IUP.
I was just going to say, when you go to Indiana University and you go back home to Pittsburgh and you say you go to Indiana, they immediately ask you if you know so-and-so who goes to IU of Pennsylvania, Indiana University of Pennsylvania. And so just the irony of the fact that he came from IUP, through James Madison, but to get to us and just turn the whole thing around. And he's a Yinzer to the core.
Big time.
Right? Yeah. So it's great to talk to him.
Well, it's good to know there's no Indianas in SEC states, because how do we keep him? How do we keep him from leaving our beloved Big Ten?
I think he signed like an 8-year deal. So,
awesome.
And this is his baby, right? I think he wants to be the guy that created the Indiana University football vibe.
Well, he's off to a hell of a start. I mean, I grew up a born and raised diehard Penn State fan, and somehow ended up with a kid at Michigan. But at least, I made sure no Ohio State male ever made it into the house, so that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, my brother went to Penn State, and I was never a Happy Valley fan because I went to Pitt for a year, so I still have some allegiances there. But yeah, going to IU, my daughter who Rose got recruited by Ohio State, and I was like, "You're out of the will."
I know you. We have our kid. We have a lot in common with our kids. My youngest just went to Case Western. She's rowing there. So
very cool.
Yeah. I always said, of all the great things my dad did for me, as growing up in this area, you're either a Penn State fan or a Pitt fan. And one of the best things my dad ever did for me was raising me a Penn State fan, because it is a brutal existence being a Pitt football fan.
Yeah, we have, but at least there's good moments every now and then.
Yeah. I mean, football. I do root for them. I don't, unless they're playing Penn State. But so crazy thing. Last time you and I were together on this podcast was 4.5 years ago, which is effing wild to think about. We were still in lockdown. That whole episode was about sports media. So before we move on from that subject, I'm just really curious to know, since you've more or less backed away from the industry of sports, how has your perspective, whether on the business of sports or as a fan, how's it changed in the couple years since you've been a little more on the outside looking in?
Well, one of the things that changed, I joined a group called Harbinger Sports Partners that buys and sells minority interests in teams. And one of the reasons I joined is the biggest private equity funds that buy big chunks of teams try to influence how things are done, right? Because they have shareholders that they're just pushing out valuation. With Harbinger, all we do is try to provide liquidity and support for the minority owners who don't ever get much love. And the reason I say all that is one of the things that kind of turned me off and led to my selling, and only a small part, but still part of it, was I'd go to the board of governors meetings, and what used to be conversations about fans and improving the fan experience turned into how do we increase valuations, enterprise value. I kept on hearing enterprise value. I was like, no, the price of hot dogs are too high. That's what we need to talk about. The referees suck. I'd rather talk about that the whole meeting. But enterprise value, to me, was not why I wanted to own a team. And so part of the reason I got involved with Harbinger, but that really, the change of bringing in private equity, and it's not just the NBA, it's the NFL and everybody, because it's so hard to create liquidity for ownership in the big four sports. So, I think what's changed in my attitude is I was so sick of, the big private equity companies that were having so much influence that I got involved with one that deals minority ownership, but that really just changed how I viewed the sports.
That's cool. The thing, I've said this about sports before, that the owners aren't really the fans own the teams, right? Like that's how we feel, and the owners are stewards.
It should be that way. It
right.
should be that way. Yeah.
Well, that's very cool. Well, lots changed in the last 4.5 years since we did this together. You stepped away from the basketball team. You stepped away from Shark Tank. You started a freaking drug company, which in 2021, I'm sure you were thinking about it, but that happened a year later. It never even came up when we talked last time.
Well, we were working on it. Yeah, we were working on it when we talked last time.
I'm sure you were. Those things don't come out of the blue like that. But tell me about what was the origin of that? What was the inspiration, or how it came to be? And then where's the business? Give us an update on where the business is now.
Sure. It's called costplusdrugs.com. And the origin story is I got a cold email from a Dr. Alex Oshmayansky, a radiologist / rocket scientist. The guy was one of those guys who graduated college at 13, got accepted into Oxford, the type of guy you hate, but he happens to be a nice guy.
Yeah.
He sends me a cold email saying that he wants to build a compounding pharmacy. And what a compounding pharmacy does is they can make different drugs on demand if there's a reason for them to make it. The typical reason is they'll make drugs that are in short supply. And what he was focused on, and we end up doing, was there are drugs like pediatric cancer drugs, Pitocin for women, having children, and 100 other drugs that go in short supply. And the people who manufacture them create the short supplies. And so I was like, okay, that doesn't make sense, but that's not a big enough business to get me excited. And it just so happened that right around the same time, the pharma bro was going to jail, I think it was. And, I'm like, how does this guy do what he did? And what he did was he took this drug, he bought the manufacturer of this drug, Daraprim, who had 100% of the supply. And since he controlled the only one manufacturing it, he jacked up the price, hundreds of percent, 1,000+%, whatever it was. And I was like, that's just wrong. And I'm like, I need to dig in more to learn more about the pharmacy industry. And the more I dug in, the more obvious was that it was completely opaque, that nobody knew anything about pricing. And he could jack up the price because people just pull pricing out of thin air, whatever they could charge. And so everybody hates it. Everybody, doesn't trust it. So I was like, you know what? Let's change that. Let's create a platform where we would show our costs, our actual costs, and have a realistic markup so that we would be cheaper than everybody else. So we created Cost Plus Drugs, started with 111 drugs. And what we did that was different and still unique to this day, shockingly enough, when you go to costplusdrugs.com and put in the name of a medication, let's say it's imatinib, which is a cancer drug, we'll show you our actual cost, right? You know what? Let me change that. We'll use tadalafil, generic Cialis, right? Because I'm guessing your audience may have more of a connection there. And so when you go to costplusdrugs.com and put in tadalafil, we'll show you our cost, and our markup is only 15%, and then we're mail order. So it's $5 for a pharmacy to review and $5 for shipping. And so when you look at, let's say, 90 tadalafil, our price before shipping is going to be $9.95, cheaper than anywhere else. I mean, I'm all about helping people make babies, right? Because we're getting a decline in the birth rate. So, cheaper than a bag of M&Ms, where it's just so cheap that people started realizing, oh my God, I can go to this site and save a lot of money on my medications. The other thing that we did that was impactful, we published our price list. There's nobody else to this day where if you wanted to say, as a company, as a benefits person, or just anybody for that matter, okay, here's all the drugs we use at our firm. Here's all the drugs we use in our hospital, whatever it may be. Here's all the drugs that the state pays for with Medicare. Here's the cost plus drugs price list. I can look them all up. And so we did that. And then the other thing that we don't do is we don't advertise. Part of the reason is we want everything to be cheaper. And if we're spending a lot of money on advertising, we're not going to be cheaper. And the presumption was, and the guys that we brought in that were from the industry were like, you can't do that. But what we did is we said, we're not going to advertise because if somebody saves $1,000 on their cancer medication, they're going to tell everybody in the Facebook group, they're going to tell the doctor, they're going to tell everybody at the hospital, that they just saved $1,000 or more on costplusdrugs.com, and that'll grow our customer base. And that's exactly what's happened. We launched January 19th of 2022, and now we've helped millions of people.
So how many, so you started with 111 drugs. Has that gone up?
Oh yeah. Now we have like 7,200 SKUs.
Wow.
Now that includes different, strengths like tadalafil, 1 milligram, 2 milligrams, 5 milligrams, whatever, but still it's grown significantly.
How do you think about impact beyond just how much money you're making?
Yeah, I'm not making money yet. We're getting close to
how
break
much
even.
revenue the company is generating. I know there's a difference between you making money and revenue, but how else are you what other things are you looking at to get a sense of even the, intrinsic impact you're having?
Oh, just by the emails that we get, the people that walk up to me on the street, or the people that post on social media. Oh my God, we were going to have to pay $900 for this medication and I'm dying anyways. And rather than my putting on the credit card and then having that become my wife's burden after I pass, I'm just not going to take the drug. And then somebody told me about cost plus drugs and it was $21 or whatever, right? We get those stories all the time. Like there's something like that on social media daily. And that's the reward. And that's just on the pharmacy side. Hopefully before the end of this year, we're going to start doing the same type of things on the medical side and bringing transparency there, not only on the pricing perspective, but also on a contractual perspective so that other companies can use it.
Can I challenge you a minute on the advertising side? I mean,
Sure.
I totally get it. I mean, it's a cost, and any cost that you incur is going to have to flow into your prices. But doesn't that also limit in some ways or significantly the awareness of this? Like that, it feels to me like it's such a no-brainer, right? It makes perfectly good sense to the biggest layperson in the world as it relates to healthcare and costs and business and everything. So is it just, where does growth and scale come from if you aren't raising awareness? And how else do you raise awareness? You and your Twitter following, right?
Well, not just my Twitter, going on every TV show, every podcast, and just doing it continuously. Like, I did Jon Stewart's show, right, on the early days, and Trevor Noah's show in the early days, and just bam, did interviews on CBS, et cetera. So now I'll do these, and, I'll go places where we're going to have the biggest impact. Cost me nothing but an hour, and we see, and our growth is always up and to the right.
So there are medically underserved parts of this country, particularly, say, rural parts of the country where there's still struggle with broadband access, probably consuming different media than the rest of the country. Are you getting a sense of like there are pockets of the country where you've had more success breaking through than others? Is there?
Not really, because the people, when you have people that don't have as much, they need it more. And what we're finding is that even people on Medicare Part D, or more in particular for Medicare Advantage, they're coming to us, which really surprised us because the out-of-pocket cost, the deductible and max out-of-pocket keeps on going up and up and up and up, making it harder. And to me, that's one of the biggest problems this whole country faces, right? We talk about insurance. Insurance doesn't really mean much. It's not a proxy for healthcare because if you're on the ACA and you are a family of 5, your deductible is going to be $4,000 or $5,000. And most families don't have the $5,000 in cash or credit. And so they're going without. And so because of that, people find out. They look for ways, they get online, they talk to people. And that's why, we've been able to grow, but that's also where we're helped. And, it's just, you would think it doesn't make any sense that people on Medicare Advantage would pay more than what they could pay at costplusdrugs.com.
The point of transparency, right? We see it in our data everywhere, from people who said, there was this kerfuffle for a minute that Amazon said that they were going to publish the tariff costs that hit people's, the cash register. And at the time we were surveying consumers about it, and everyone's like, yeah, I would love to know that, like, what percentage of this price is attributable to this or that. And we see, transparency. Everyone says, I'm okay with AI. I just want to know when it's being used, right? So transparency is a really big thing. It's like transparency and privacy are two of those things that the consumers say they desperately want, but they're not really willing to give up a whole lot for it, right?
Right, of course.
But not even just in the drugs industry. I can't think of another business, maybe you can, in any industry where they publish their costs, right? Like nobody says, here's my profit margin on the business I'm doing. Nobody. That's the biggest secret in all of business.
For sure. And so I was listening to a podcast, and this guy comes on and he says, I have the formula for trust. And every business, your entire business is based on trust, because the minute you lose trust with your consumers, unless you're the only source, you're going to lose your customers, period, end of story. So he said the formula for trust was trust equals transparency divided by self-interest. So the more transparency, the higher the numerator. The less self-interest, the lower the denominator, which puts the ratio higher. So we're like, okay, I'm going to publish our costs, which tells everybody our self-interest. So people can't speculate that I'm making 200% on this drug. They know I'm making 15. And, where do we get 15? It was like, just pulled it out of, thin air, but it seemed fair.
Right.
And I think that's the difference, right? Like, people talk about going to Giant Eagle, right? You don't know what the margins are, and it seems like they take the blame when prices go up, when they only have 1% to 2% margins.
Right. I was going to say, anyone who knows anything about the grocery industry knows that they're not making 15%.
No, not at all, right? And so having that transparency makes all the difference to gain trust.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. So, all right, your drug costs are one part of a massive labyrinth of healthcare problems, right? And arguably one of the biggest. So one of the things you didn't do since the last time we talked is run for president, which was a really smart thing to do. But let's just say hypothetically you were president, and you were throwing around executive orders like they were Skittles, like some people. What would you change? What would be the first two things you would change about the healthcare industry if you could?
I'd make them sell to pirates.
Amen.
The inhibiting factor that people don't talk about when it comes to healthcare is people's deductibles. And if, I said before, if you can't afford your deductible, doesn't matter how good of insurance you have. And if you can't afford your out-of-pocket, your copay, your co-insurance, doesn't matter how good of insurance you have. And so I would create a program through executive order or whatever that guaranteed everybody's deductible at some level, right? Everybody under the ACA, let's say, because Medicare's got its own thing, Medicaid's got its own thing. If you have your insurance through an employer, you've got your thing, right? So if you have group insurance or you have ACA insurance, I would say that we're going to guarantee to the provider your deductible if the price was in a certain range, right? Let's just say Medicaid plus 120% of Medicaid. And you think about it, if I want to buy a house in the state of Pennsylvania or Texas, and most cities, they'll give you down payment help, right? They'll put up $20K to help you get your down payment on the house. They'll, guarantee your mortgage or guarantee parts of your mortgage. They'll guarantee, the SBA will guarantee parts of your business loan. You can get your student loans guaranteed. There's so many things, agricultural loans, they'll guarantee. But if you're about to die, or you are, severely trauma, you face severe trauma, whatever it may be, it could be just a sprained ankle, and you can't afford your deductible, you're fucked. And what I would say is, no, that's wrong, right? We are going to come up with a means-tested way that says, whatever insurance you get, if you choose insurance, is up to you. Because you wouldn't even necessarily have to get insurance if there's a means-tested payback. And then we'll let you choose your doctor as long as within the price range. So it's up to you to shop. But if it's 500, 1,000, 15,000, we'll pay for it, right? But you're going to have to pay it back. And if you make $30,000 a year, well, that's Medicaid. Let's say you make $50,000 a year, you might pay 3% of your paycheck every time, and it'll follow you wherever you go. If you make $250,000, you may pay 8% of your paycheck till you pay it off, or we write it off, right? Which we would probably write it off after 15 years. Now, that may seem like a long-term obligation, and it is, but it beats the hell out of not being able to get the care you need. And if you can't pay for it, you just pay for it. That's up to you.
So, brilliant policy idea. What the objection would be the cost, the potential cost to government of that?
Well, if you stick with just ACA recipients, they're already subsidizing premiums there anyway.
Right.
And if the plan owner, if you will, or patient, if they don't have to pay premiums any longer for insurance, well then, you could even make them put it in a health savings account or put it in a savings account, so that money that they would have paid in premium accumulates, so it's less likely that the government's going to have to reinsure them.
So a lot of our listeners are business leaders, whether or not they're as familiar with tadalafil as you had suggested, but all come from the world, mostly come from the world of business. A lot of CEOs, C-types listening. I know in the case of our business, our health insurance costs, I think, are our third. It's our payroll, our compute, and then our health care, right?
Yep.
And it goes up, and every year we revisit it. We're cringing, walking in, waiting for the sticker shock.
And your broker says to you, right? Your broker consultant says, "I got you a better deal than everybody else.
Yeah.
You only went up 5%. Everybody else went up 9%.
Yes.
What a joke.
And it's complicated, particularly any company that's got employees in different parts of the country and even parts of the world and all that sort of stuff. So you talk to lots of people like me and businesses large and small. What's your advice to the business leader listening to this of what they can be doing better to manage? Is there anything we can be doing to manage?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Let it rip.
Yeah, there's a ton. Like my company, right? Like one of my companies has 400 lives covered. And so what we do is we direct contract. Now, we're not in as many cities as you are, but we went to the hospitals and providers in the area. And we said, look, when you negotiate with an insurance company, that's great. You negotiate with an insurance company. But why is it that the cash price is always lower than the insurance company price? Like literally anybody can walk in and pay less. I'm like, and the reason is because of all the administrative costs and all that kind of stuff. Okay, fair. What I said was, if you let us pay the cash price, I won't have any pre-authorization denials. We'll do all the pre-auth. So by the time, one of our employees or their family members get there, they're approved. Number two, I'll pay it in cash up front because I'm getting the cash price. That's only right. And you'll get the full amount that we've negotiated because it's not unusual for insurance companies, not all, but some insurance companies to underpay the negotiated rate. And by doing that, we're able to save versus last year pretty much 10 to 12, 15% every month. Every now and then, if somebody, gets cancer or something bad happens, we might be a higher number. And the point of all that is we created something called costpluswellness.com. And we are going to publish all the contracts that we created with all of our providers so that with all the pricing, all the terms, everything, so that you can do it. Anybody can copy that and do it for their company. And for those of you that have, somebody in this city, somebody in that city, you can get wraparound networks from Aetna and others, Blue Cross Blue Shield, that, I think we pay $18 per member per month, so that if we have somebody in Toronto, we have somebody in Nevada, whatever it may be, San Diego, then they're covered as well. And we also say, if you buy through Cost Plus Drugs, there's no copay because we know we're going to be cheaper. And, people love that.
The connection there at the end, I didn't know about it and I wasn't expecting. The idea of kind of administering that, it's daunting to think about, right? Like, because I think we convince ourselves that the cost of the broker and the cost of all the middlemen in the process are offset what would otherwise be the administrative cost we would have of trying to do it ourselves. But you're saying
not at
it
all.
doesn't.
No. So healthcare is actually really easy. right? You go to the doctor or you go to the hospital, whatever it may be, and you either get good news or bad news. And if it's good news, you get to leave with nothing, great. But the reality is the hard part is how much does it cost and how do you pay for it? And the entire healthcare complex industry is built on arbitraging both of those points. What does it cost and how you pay for it? That's it. In reality, when you go to a provider, doctor, hospital, whatever, and you have an insurance card, there's something called a TPA, Transaction Processing Administration, and they process it. And they make sure that they get the right price and they get the bill to us or they get it to the insurance company and they make sure if the deductible has been paid. There are independent TPAs that we hired, and I'm happy to share. We'll share all that on Cost Plus Wellness when we publish it soon. And then you have a pharmacy benefit manager that handles all the mechanics of prescriptions and how they get paid. And whether or not, like Cost Plus Drugs doesn't carry all drugs, but you can use us or whoever's cheapest for your drugs. But you have that TPA work with the pharmacy benefit manager who is now going to be transparent. Because the problem that you have with your plan right now, and I haven't seen it, but I know it, is you have no transparency whatsoever. Go back. Here's for everybody out there. Here's a little test for y'all. Go to your pharmacy benefit manager and just say, I want all my claims for the past year because I want to audit them and I want to compare them to what we contractually agreed upon. I will bet dime to dollar that people watching this did not get everything they wanted. Now, I'm not saying they all do that, but a lot do. And so being able to go back and ask for your claims is the first step. Because this is what I did with the Mavs when we first started Cost Plus. I asked for our claims, took them 9 months, and I had to scream bloody murder and say I was going to tweet about them if they didn't get it to me. I finally got it, got all my prescription claims, and I compared to our Cost Plus drugs. And this is day one when we didn't have any volume. And we spent $169,000 on generics that cost more than $30 at the Mavs in 18 months. The same drugs, same volume, same period would have cost $19,000 from Cost Plus Drugs.
Wow.
And that was my buddy, a guy I'd been working with for 20 years. That was my broker. He's not my broker. He's not my buddy anymore.
Wow.
And the point of it is the PBMs and the insurance companies know that you don't know what you're doing. And they know that you're dependent on a broker or consultant. And they know that broker and consultant has some level of dependency on the PBM/insurance companies because they own each other, right? And so it's a very vicious cycle where the patient and the company, your best interests are not in their minds at all. But it's not hard to check. So the most basic test is just say, I want all my claims and I want the cost associated, the net cost after rebates associated with each claim, and I want to be able to audit them. And if they come back and they say, well, I can't do it, it's against your dad, and da-da-da-da-da, you know you're getting ripped off. If they say, sure, but you have to use our affiliate to audit, you know you're getting ripped off. If they say, we don't have the net cost to associate with this, you know you're getting ripped off. I mean, it is just a scam inside a scam inside a scam. And that's why they're opaque. It should be easy when you go to your broker and say, just give me a price list for all the drugs we used last year. I want to know what's going to cost us, and we can try to estimate what it's going to be. They won't do it. They can't do it. It's just,
well, they can't do it. Is there wouldn't be some HIPAA or other reason why they couldn't?
No, because it's all de-identified.
Right.
You're not putting a patient's name.
They'll claim they can't do it for some inane bureaucratic reason. Something or other.
Exactly. And so, that is the big first step. Take care, because there's other insane things, right? So if you had members who wanted to use a GLP-1, you would think it would make perfect sense to go to Novo Nordisk or Lilly and say, I'd like to do a corporate program working directly with you guys so that we can optimize the results for all of our employees. I'm sure you guys you're not allowed to. And not only that, the PBM you work with doesn't provide any type of claims about GLP-1s to a manufacturer, any claims to the manufacturer. So if there's something going on, that negatively impacts the health of your members, No one's going to see it because you don't have access to that data.
Well, good advice to everybody listening. I'll probably take it ourselves here. I never even thought about it that way. I mean, there's a lot of industries. We were saying before, I couldn't think of another company that was so transparent that it shared its costs. But I can think of many industries where so many companies in that industry benefit from the lack of transparency.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Most areas of insurance, ad tech in our world, like it's almost like all these things were this complexity was manufactured just so more people could make money managing their way through the complexity of it.
That's a feature, not a bug.
Yes, very much a feature, not a bug. So what are your goals? Like did I see you're maybe getting into manufacturing? Like is there?
No, we already are manufacturing. Okay. Yeah. And so we're doing that. Our goal is to fuck up healthcare, right? Nobody looks at healthcare, put aside the doctors. And doctors, by the way, are incredibly underpaid. I mean, like I was talking to a doctor who was talking about hip replacements and say, in some places, the doctor only gets $1,000 per hip replacement. And so they have to do 8 to 10 a day just to be able to make a living and pay back. That's insane.
It's insane.
I want my doctor getting paid a lot of money so I can get, so they're great and not tired after all those operations. We're trying to get to the point where we can, all these things we've talked about, we can start having an impact.
Look, there aren't many things that we see in our data where public opinion has been on a steadier and more precipitous decline than satisfaction with the U.S. healthcare system. So, if anything is begging to be fucked up, that's probably what it is. And look, I will say for what it's worth, because we work with insurance companies. There are really good people working in those businesses trying to solve these problems, right? You'd be hard pressed to find anyone who would say that our healthcare system isn't broken in a lot of different ways. It's just a really, really hard thing to fix,
No, it really, really is. I mean, we've worked with people at the biggest insurance companies, and they're certainly good people there. PBMs, maybe not as much, but the insurance company folks are at least trying.
So kind of a transition, you've said this publicly and you mentioned it even to me, is one of the biggest reasons that you sort of stepped away from so many other things that you were doing is that you wanted to be able to spend more time with your kids. And our kids are like exactly the same vintage, mine and yours, right? Lots of other things in common. And as you know this with me, like I'm 3 weeks now into empty nesting. But also seems like going to visit one of our kids every weekend. So I don't know how much really is all that's changed. But
yeah, you're lucky Case and Pittsburgh are close.
Yeah, well, and Ann Arbor is only 4 hours too. So we make that trip quite a bit. So were you able to get that time?
Oh yeah.
Okay, awesome.
For sure.
And I'm sure you get asked this. You probably get asked the following question all the time, which is you've got kids in college, heading to college, graduated from college, heading into the workforce, and I'm sure you get asked all the time what advice you give them. Right? Or would you give them, what advice would you give my kids who are, one of them's in musical theater, so she's not that worried about AI, but the other one probably will have to confront that. So I'm sure you get asked that question a lot, and anybody who wants to hear your answer to it can probably find it on any number of podcasts. I'll ask you the question in reverse. What have you learned from your kids?
One of my kids doesn't like AI because of the energy usage.
That's my oldest daughter, man. She hates it. She's like, she's anti.
Yeah, but then I sent her some data that said the TV shows she streams are like 6 hours worth. Each episode is like 6 hours worth of AI utilization. And so she's backed off a little bit. But my other two, all day, every day, and I mean, I tell them, like I tell every young kid, there's going to be two types of companies in this country. There's going to be those who are great at AI and those who used to be in business. There's no in between. And, if you're looking for a job, it's going to be easier to work for a small company than a large company because the large companies are trying to use AI to cut back. And they have the resources to understand how to implement it, apply it to processes. They have great AI people. Small to medium-sized businesses, like our size companies, we need people that understand AI and agentics, can go and look at our processes and automate them using AI. And as we grow, help us become more productive, competitive, and profitable using AI. And so, I think redirecting kids as they graduate from college, in particular to small to medium-sized businesses, as opposed to trying to work for a big company. They have to compete. They have to compete differently, and they don't have the resources to just, have a huge IT department. So they're going to go to kids, just like we saw with the early days of the internet. You hired young kids who were more comfortable with it, who learned IT already and could come in and implement new things.
Well, no doubt. Like at least like one of my kids is Broadway bound when she graduates. I think stage acting's one of the few things fairly protected from hey, I don't know, maybe.
The acting, yes, but some of the different things that they'll do will use AI.
Sure.
Like costume design, right? Or the
even
videos
writing screenplays and things, of course.
Scripts, everything, graphics.
No question. So you may remember from the last time we did this, I wrap up with poll questions similar to the ones you see at the end of my email every Saturday. I handpicked a few for you. Pittsburgh question: what's your opinion of ketchup on eggs?
Absolutely.
I was at an offsite for a board I'm on last week, and it was pick, grab your breakfast and go to your table. And one guy goes, "Damn! Tell me you're from Pittsburgh without telling me you're from Pittsburgh."
The food.
Yeah, most people not big on the ketchup on eggs.
And all those lines, right? With my kids, from the time they were little, I used to tell them the Mark Cuban rule of food: if you like one thing, ketchup, and you like another thing, eggs, and you put them together, it's going to be better.
Yes.
And they would be like, gross, gross, gross. And I was like,
that's great. Tell me you're from Pittsburgh without telling me you're from Pittsburgh. Do you think it's possible to have it all as a working parent?
I mean, all's relative. We're always going to be terrified about the health and well-being of our kids. And so you never have that under control. But yeah, there's certain people that that I'm jealous of, right? That, the relationships you have with your kids are different from family to family to family. And to me, having it all means my kids return my phone calls.
Yes, yeah.
Don't scream at me in the car, "Dad, you suck," and da-da-da-da-da. Or, "Leave me alone, Dad, you're embarrassing me in front of my friends." Or my daughter, when she went off to school, and I said, "I'm going to the move, and I don't care what you say." And you're like, "Can you wear a wig in disguise?" Like, oh.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
it's all relative.
Being Mark Cuban's child has to have a different level of challenges.
Oh, for sure.
Not unlike being a girl with the last name Dick, which, by the way,
no kidding, right? It has to be challenging.
I think my kids and yours could commiserate on the trials of your childhood. I think this notion of I think the question of can you have it all as a working parent is sort of that. It's like that work-life balance conversation, right? And no one's ever balanced. It's like, I forget what those things are where it was like you'd stand on it was like a skateboard on a rollerball and you try to go back and forth.
Right.
You're never dead. You're never level. You're always leaning one direction or the other.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends, right? It just depends that, just in terms of basic issues, if you're working, you're going to miss time, right? But it depends on your job and what the requirements are and the choices you make there. Are you driven to make as much money as possible and move up the ladder to get the highest possible position and maximize your earnings or your position or your title? That's one thing. That's where you make your choices. I didn't get married till I was 42. I had a girlfriend in my 20s. And she was like, wanted the picket fence. And, we dated for a few years. And she was like, "Mark, I want to get married." And I was like, "What's your name again?" Because she knew I was on a mission, and that mission came first.
Right. And well, again, I think that also the notion of having it all means something different. And there's no such thing. There really is. No one has it all. Lastly, I kind of bring us back to the beginning of the conversation. Not gonna ask you to, although you're welcome to weigh in on it, but do you think it's a bad idea or a good idea for middle and high school athletes to monetize their name, image and likeness?
Building this on my experience with the Mavs. High school, like if you're a senior, probably even a junior, I'm okay with it. Younger than that, I think that's a little bit much, and I'll tell you why. Up until NIL started, we would get players that come in who never opened up a checking account, didn't know how credit cards worked, had no understanding of cash flow or statements, building wealth. They just had a friend who they were going to trust, and they got ripped off. Now, if they got it in high school, they already have an agent. If they're that type of athlete, they'll have an agent. So they start to get a basic understanding, and the agents don't want them to completely collapse unless you just get the wrong one.
Right.
And then in college, by the time they're out of college, particularly in football, they understand the economics and how much they're getting paid. And that's what the guys talk about all the time. And so, and girls. And so I think it's a good thing because it does a better job of preparing athletes, particularly those who aren't going to make it to the pro leagues, preparing them for their financial future and understanding how money works.
Yeah, I think everybody, whether you're an athlete making money from NIL or not, a little better financial education at that stage of life.
For sure. Well, it's just like in music, right? With your daughter, those who are able to get paid for what they were doing, they start having a better understanding of their worth, about how the economics work, how the industry works, and why some people are paid and why some are not. That's a huge plus from my
it was for us. I mean, Maddie she got like commercial gigs when she was like 10, 11, like local commercial gigs, and started putting money in a bank account. And it forced us to have to help educate her about it, And now it's a whole different ballgame. But yeah, most everyone, 73% of Americans think that NIL for middle and high school kids is a bad idea. I mean, there's a lot of people who just think, the common refrain is that NIL is like ruining college sports. I don't buy it.
I mean, it's not the NIL that's ruining it. It's the fact that kids go school to
school. The transferring. Yes, correct.
Yes.
Correct. Right. So maybe a cap on how many transfers you can do would
or just one, right? One. You can move one time and that's it.
Yeah. Well, Mark, it was great to have you back. I really appreciate it. Appreciate everything you do to support the company and the friend you've been and the mentor you've been. It's awesome. And look, man, fuck up healthcare.
Amen, baby.
Yeah.
Fuck up advertising, right?
I'll fuck up advertising. You fuck up healthcare, and we'll meet in the end zone. Cool, man. Well, listen, hope to have you back 4 or so years from now, if not sooner. And
hopefully sooner.
Hope to see you face to face sometime soon.